Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Talent Gap Fireside Chat, where we talk about causes of and solutions to the talent gap. I'm your host, Pete Strauss, and joining me today is Mike Andrews. He is the owner and cybersecurity advisor over at Yastis. Welcome, Mike.
Hey, Pete. Thanks so much for having me today. Glad to be here with you.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for being here. Could you give our audience a little background on yourself and your career thus far?
Yeah, so most of my career spent in the Department of Defense, which has a nice new name, Department of War, doing cybersecurity, IT, telecommunications. Before that, I started this business, Yastis, in 2019, went full-time at it in 2020. We do cybersecurity advisory work for startups and small and medium-sized U.S. businesses, mainly focused on assessments, putting forth a roadmap, and then helping companies improve both to lower risk and compliance.
Nice. How have you found, I guess, the transition from government side to working with private sector companies?
I'd say it was actually tough going from government, where we largely spend money, to business where we're trying to make money. And it was harder than expected because I do have a business background. My bachelor's is in business administration. I've been investing in stocks for 20 something years following business. But yeah, it's pretty tough in general. And also it's a competitive field, cybersecurity and compliance.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, there's so many consulting firms nowadays and CISO firms and, CISOs striking out on their own and starting their own shops. So it's an interesting time. It seems like the market's being increasingly fragmented. But I guess, we normally start with the talent gap as we talk about. Would you say that the security field's talent gap is a real thing? And if so, what would you say it looks like?
No, I don't think there's a talent gap, meaning it doesn't exist in the world. And we see that because if the average job application is getting hundreds of applicants, you're going to find some good people in there. I do think there's a talent mismatch, meaning what companies are asking for and the candidates that are applying may not line up right, but that can be adjusted. I don't think it's something that doesn't exist though in the marketplace. So I'd say if a company has a good hiring process and a good recruiter, and they treat people well and they're clear in the job application, it should minimize that. But no, I don't think it's a real thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think at the end of the day, we have enough quote unquote bodies to fill every security role in the field many times over. The question is, how evenly are those candidates distributed? It seems like the majority of the hiring is in these very niche or demand for hiring is in these very niche disciplines where maybe there aren't a whole lot of candidates. And the hundreds or thousands of people applying to the role aren't qualified because they don't have that very niche skill set, but they're shooting their shot, quote unquote. And, as AI has gotten better, I think, and a lot of these tools that are able to mass apply for people, it's only gotten worse, the volume issue that we're seeing. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, if you have a good recruiter, if you have a good process, if you have a decent company, decent team, you can get through a lot of these issues. It's not rocket science, but it does require a lot of the right, factors lining up and the stars aligning in such a way that you make a good hire. But so many companies, in my experience, just don't get the basics right. I would imagine at some point you kind of see some of this firsthand in working with small companies as a consultant. How do you view that? Like, are you seeing anything on the ground where, maybe it's a small company and they don't know if they need a dedicated security person? Obviously, they're hiring you for a reason. You're there to help shore up gaps in their compliance posture or, what have you. But I guess at what point do you think a company needs to hire, a dedicated security person in-house versus, leveraging consultants?
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to look at it. And when companies do bring us on, it tends to be for a very specific reason or two, like a big lost deal or a close call with what they thought was a data breach. But they're not doing before that. So to decide whether to bring on someone in-house, I would say the main factors are the workload and the risk level, because the workload, like to some degree, companies are going to try to leverage their existing personnel, right? Like if they're a 10, 20 person company, even, they'll probably have someone doing IT work. It may not even be a dedicated IT worker. It may just be an engineer. So do you have the bandwidth to do it even if you want to? And then you got to consider the risk level of it. What level of precision do you need at your company? Yeah, that really varies. If you're a farming business, maybe it's really not that important. If you have a ridiculous amount of money in the bank and you could survive 20 data breaches, maybe it's not that important for you. But you need to figure out, these companies need to figure out how important it really is for them. What's the dollars and cents of it? And that in itself can be challenging.
Yeah, well, and to quantify security risks too. I mean, it's challenging enough for a CISO when going to the board to say, hey, here's what these risks actually mean in real dollar value terms. But for a small business that doesn't understand security in the slightest, they have a hard time actually wrapping their head around, I would imagine, what security risks actually mean. And I guess, that's what you're there to help them through. Yeah, it's interesting. I had a recent client referral. Hopefully we're going to be working together. They're going to be hiring like a director of IT, it sounds like, but they're currently working with 2 MSPs to handle like a director of IT function and then like a CTO function. And they're paying like $380K for a small business for those 2 functions. And my first blush was, well, I can find them a full-time IT director for $180 to $200K salary, and they're able to bring all of that oversight and everything completely in-house. And it just makes dollars and cents. They can save a ton of money, have more control over their IT environment, and have somebody that's more dedicated to those large projects that you'd mentioned. So I think obviously it's very dependent on individual business use case. And there's some obvious outliers where it makes way more sense to bring somebody in-house versus, outsource. But it does seem like increasingly with consulting firms, basically you can benefit from economies of scale. If say you have a managed SOC and you have multiple clients, that's easier for you to take on versus a client who might be have to build a SOC in-house, and nobody wants to do that. So where do you think the break points are there, I guess? I guess you kind of addressed that before.
Well, yeah, I'll give you my answer, and then I'm kind of curious to hear why they decided to invest that much in the MSP. So I think a lot of times companies view it as an all or none, right? Like maybe a company realizes we based on what we do, we need a SOC. So we're either going to go with this MSP or we're going to do it internally. But it doesn't have to be all or none. You could bring in, maybe hire that IT manager, IT director, CTO, and then have them do a lot of things in-house, but also have that external SOC. And that's something we have to work on with clients too. Show them it's not all or none. It's pretty easy to bring a lot in-house while still keeping the hard parts or the more sensitive parts external. So what do you think of that? And if you could tell us some more about why they decided to do that.
So it's actually a friend of a friend, so I can't give too many details there. It was just a situation that I encountered here recently, and I found it really interesting that they're paying that kind of money and still don't have really much idea of what the MSPs are actually doing with all of that money. Then I think too, when you're not a technical person yourself, like me as a recruiter, I couldn't tell you what makes a good CTO per se, other than some of the intangibles that I look for and communication ability and stuff like that. But on the technical side, it's like you don't know what you don't know if you're the CEO of a company that's a non-technical company. So you need a trusted advisor, basically, like our mutual friend, who's brokering these relationships and saying, well, hey, here's somebody who can help you with that and help you work through all of these issues. But so much of it seems to come down to trust too. You have to be able to trust that advisor is actually giving you the right advice and not, just steering you towards a deal where they're getting some sort of kickback or something, I guess. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. And companies often think, should we handle it internally? Should we work with an MSP? Should we work with an advisor? But if you're not really sure, you don't have to just rely on your gut feeling and your favorite LLM, you can bring in an advisor for 2 hours, an hour or two, and say, we want an unbiased opinion. Don't just sell us on your services. Lay it out for us. Be an advisor. Show us what we should be doing about this. And in the case like you described, an advisor might come in and maybe crunch some numbers, ask some hard questions the company didn't consider, and then say, no, actually, it might seem expensive, but based on your company, that is a good deal. Or maybe they say it's not the right deal for you, and here's why. Because if a company is made most of the time to focus on business, selling different types of things, products and services, whereas a company that's like a IT advisor, cybersecurity advisor, compliance advisor, they do this stuff every day. So they're not just coming in to be another set of hands. They should be bringing strategies and that wisdom. So that way, like each hour that you work with them, for example, or each project is getting you more bang for the buck than just 1 hour per whatever their rate is, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's so interesting too. You mentioned strategy. In this scenario, part of the issue is that they're not taking on the strategy, the current MSPs. They're more so just executing the plan without any thought to, here's what we might be doing, need to be doing to modernize, or, here's how we can improve efficiency. They're just kind of serving as admins, basically, which that's not a very expensive skill set in the grand scheme of things. It's the strategy that's the expensive part. But yeah, it's been an interesting situation to work through. I'm hoping to talk to them more here soon. But what about, I would imagine there are some parallels there. Well, actually, I just had another thought. Another good way that you can find advisors nowadays is online. So for instance, there's so many subreddits and Discord channels and Slack channels for all of these specialty areas. So for instance, SOC 2, there's a SOC 2 subreddit. Now there's a SOC 2 quality guild Slack channel. And these are great places to ask these questions where maybe you benefit from those economies of scale. You basically crowdsource advice, and, in getting multiple opinions very quickly, you can more easily, I think, parse through what good advice and bad advice looks like once you see more than just a single opinion. When I'm selecting any service provider, I try to get at least, a few quotes or a few pieces of advice to see, how those differ and what the prices differ and that sort of thing. But it can be a lot, I think, for smaller companies, which helps to have somebody just kind of make it simple for them. Because you may not know what all this advice on Reddit is. So I guess that's where the advisor comes in.
Yeah, there are some good groups on Reddit, and that SOC 2 guild you mentioned, I am on there. There's I think 4, 5, maybe even 600 people right now. It's growing like crazy. The leaders of it are highly reputable, both on the audit side and on the third-party risk management side in general. And those type of resources are fantastic. They are out there. But these days, information is everywhere, and that's both a gift and a curse, right? Like an LLM, it's powerful. It can be really wise, but we need to know the shortfalls of these things. We can't just say, what does it say? We got to think, how could this be wrong? And that's not to say don't use them. I use them left and right, but I have some processes to get to the root of things, and we can't outsource our thinking and our decision making. We still need to have assurance to make sure that we're using all this information for the right purposes. So if we're collaborating with people like the SOC 2 guild that you mentioned, that's a great way to start, because it doesn't mean you have to go in there and find someone to hire. You could just go in there, read information, ask the right person the right few questions, and more often than not, they'll just give you some advice that might pertain to your situation without saying, oh, for me to answer those simple questions, you have to hire me. It's not all or nothing.
Yeah, well, and that's a good point too. There are a lot of people out there willing to help. And I think about that the same way when it comes to hiring entry level and security. There are so many people that are willing to be mentors, and so many people that need to be mentees, but often they just have a hard time finding each other. But one thing, speaking of entry level, I'm passionate about, and I I've been trying to assemble basically a webinar lunch and learn of a bunch of recruiters on a global scale to see if we can basically let the entry level folks know in security, like, here's how brutal the landscape is right now. It's thousands of applicants per job. There's no shortcut to 100K like you've been told. What do we do to hire more entry level people into security? I mean, it seems to me like those jobs are becoming more and more rare as the AI gets better and is now replacing some level 1 analysts and SOCs. What can we do to hire more of those folks on the hiring side?
Do you mean from the company perspective or from the job applicant perspective?
Yeah, because ultimately, I think there's a lot of good advice for applicants. But if everybody's doing everything right, they can still have a hard time getting one of those few entry level jobs because we just have a supply and demand issue, at the end of the day. So how can we convince companies to hire more of these folks, I guess?
Yeah, that's a good question. It would come down to a lot of ways determining existing capacity with the personnel and the tooling they have. For example, a SOC. Say, how many alerts can you realistically respond to with the people and tools that you have? And it's not the easiest calculation always, but there is a way to do it. And we can't just throw our hands up and say, oh, this is hard, let's not use data. You got to use the data. Figure out what you need, figure out what you'd benefit from, because that's how you can make a data-driven decision that's in the best interest of your business. And there's no one right way to look at it across the board. So I would say it's like a CISO that's advocating to get more funding to hire people. Just come with the data. If we do that properly, the business is like anything else. They're going to act when the data is clear in the terms that the business leaders understand, and it will resonate. Yes, you will have to think about the questions that they're going to ask. You will have to answer, why can't we just outsource it or use software? But if we're answering those questions, I think there's still capacity to hire more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess the issue I see is right now with such a crowded market that we have and so many experienced people on the market, what incentive do the hiring managers actually have to hire somebody entry level if they can hire a mid-level or senior level person for essentially entry level pay? Like what's the calculus there? What business sense does that make? It almost seems to me like it has to be either one, a long-term thing, or two, more of an altruistic thing where, hey, I'm doing good for the future of the industry because we're all going to be worse off if we don't have senior people in 5 years because nobody trained them today. But that doesn't speak very well to the person asking, well, why can't we just hire somebody experienced, in the short term? Do we really care as a company about doing the industry a solid, or do we just want to keep our lights on and pay as little as possible for the most experience possible, I guess? Is there a solution to that?
I would say the altruism's more often than not going to happen at the individual level to some degree. But if we're thinking about how things should happen in general or will happen in general, companies are going to do whatever makes the most business sense. And I think for the most part, we should not be surprised by that and kind of go along with that. Because if there is a real need, there's a way to prove it. And the decision on whether to hire one mid-level or senior level person or maybe 2 or 3 junior people, if the numbers make sense, I think there is a way to bring in more junior level people. I'm personally a big advocate of that because having good junior level people and processes, systems in place can allow the more senior level people to do the important tasks that require certain skill sets, certain strategies, certain levels of assurance. But yeah, it's always going to be a business decision.
Yeah, well, and the more senior folks are going to have more experience to know how to better make those high level decisions, strategy decisions, judgment calls that maybe the junior folks can't. I just see it seems like increasingly anything that's more of a task oriented type of position is being automated away because a lot of this automation is good at executing individual tasks, but it can't think, so it seems like you almost have to make the case that, hey, these junior level people, they are really capable thinkers. They just don't have the experience to make the right high level decisions yet. And at some point in the future, they're going to get there. But like, you can't guarantee, I guess, when that's going to be. I think a lot of people think, okay, well, we're going to invest in somebody junior level. In theory, great. I would love to do that. But what happens when they get their first 6 months or year of experience and then they leave? And then all of a sudden we've spent all of that time getting this person up to speed to where they can actually contribute. And we're not getting the payoff on it. So I guess that's the other side of it. Like, how can we hang on to people once we've invested in them as a company or as a hiring manager?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like, with pensions gone now, companies and individuals may not realize how much of a seismic shift that is. There's no need to stay with the same company for 10, 20, 30 years anymore. So we have to find other ways to incentivize people. And a lot of times that's going to be with money and incentives. If you're a startup or a company with the potential to grant stock options, that's a common way to do it. But you also want to give people a sense of growth. If people don't see the road ahead, they're going to go to another company because to them, that's their road ahead. So we have to realize that we can't box people in because they're going to find a way out. And that's fine. It's like we should be giving them that path within. And there's a lot of ways for people to grow like that. So we have to think about this proactively because, there is a big ramp up time in this field. And if a company is just training people and then shocked when they leave, we can't just point the finger at the person that left.
Yeah, which I think people with certain personality traits, maybe higher in narcissism, they would see that as a personal attack when somebody leaves. But I think most people aren't necessarily wired that way. And you make a good point about kind of laying out a roadmap for people. Here's how you get to that next level, or here's how the company is going to invest in you. It's all about transparency in my mind. Even if you're not able to give somebody a promotion, just telling them why, there's a reason for this. It's not because I don't like you. It's because, the company can't afford the new salary, or we just need you to execute or get these different certifications or learn this new skill set. People have to have something to be working towards, I think, and to see a future with a company in order to be, I think, emotionally invested in a company long term. Because if they don't feel that investment from the company side, they're not going to invest any loyalty on their side as well. And like you said, it's becoming more and more rare for people to actually feel any sense of loyalty to employers. They see all these mass layoffs and situations that if they were the boss, they think that, they wouldn't be the ones doing this to people. But, I think there's a lot of tough decisions being made nowadays. And a lot of companies may be doubling, tripling down on AI a little bit too quickly. And who knows, we'll see if there's a backlash to that and we see a flurry of hiring after people or companies realize that, hey, we implemented AI, but we have nobody to run it and it's kind of making a mess out of things. Do you envision that happening over the next few years?
Oh, yeah. Yes. Whether it's government or private sector, I think both when it comes to technical hiring and maybe getting rid of people, as well as the economy in general, it always overshoots. We might feel like we're so smart at the individual level and that things just work themselves out. But no, it often, like the stock market, often goes up way more than it should and goes down way more than it should. It's not rational. And the same as with hiring. Right now there's over exuberance about AI's ability. But there's going to be a cycle to where companies are aware that there are shortfalls and they need to maintain that level of assurance. And having a software tool doesn't equate to assurance. You can do more with software tools, but it's not a replacement for people. The CEO is not going to look at not going to say, oh, well, the AI told you to do that. Oh, then it's completely fine that you messed up. We still need to be accountable for our decision making, whether we use AI or not.
That's a good point about accountability, and something people don't necessarily think about often. But ultimately, it comes down to somebody's always got to be responsible for any decisions that are being made. And yeah, like you said, it's not any system or automation or software that can take that blame or that accountability or that responsibility. Ultimately, it's always going to fall on a person. But yeah, I've certainly seen that play out in GRC over the last 5 years as these compliance automation platforms have raised so much money. And it seems to be in GRC anyway that they're the only ones hiring right now. The traditional audit firms, not so much. Private equity has come in and laid off the partners. And if they do hire anybody, it's one or two senior consultants or everybody's offshore. So do you think there's going to be, I don't know, any backlash to all of this reliance on software and offshoring and all of these different factors in the GRC industry specifically?
I think it'll come down to peer accountability. If compliance is largely peer accountability, like we have laws, regulations, guidelines. Okay, those are out there all the time. But what makes companies focus on security even more? That deal closing, that potential client is often the reason companies tend to their cybersecurity. And, we can't be too surprised by that. So if things change and companies have more of a reason to focus on cybersecurity, I think they will. But until then, they won't.
Yeah. Well, you brought up earlier the idea that security tends to be highly reactive. It's often not proactive. It's like, okay, we need to meet this compliance mandate. Let's just do as little as we can to meet that compliance mandate. Or, our compliance is saying that we need to have a SIM in place or we need to have a SOC in place. Okay, let's do that, but let's pay as little as possible and not so much worry about the actual security of the matter. I think often that's the default, especially in an uncertain economy. But at the end of the day, it's the clients, the end clients that are paying for security products or services that, they're the tail that wags the dog, essentially. So, if the clients say don't care about a high quality SOC 2, they just want to get a SOC 2 so they can sell to enterprise customers, or they think that's what they need to sell to enterprise customers, they're going to go with the cheapest option possible. And logically, maybe that makes sense. Is there such thing as a customer that is more motivated by quality security work versus just the cheapest option? And if so, how do you find that customer? Because I'd love to have some as a recruiter as well.
I've said it before. I've made LinkedIn posts. We've never had a single client that just felt like doing cybersecurity, right? Businesses don't say, I hope we get really big so we can have a really big cybersecurity team. They do what they get away with, what it takes to meet their goals. So when it comes to quality, I would say they usually care about that when they've thought through the ramifications of not having quality, or maybe they had to deal with the ramifications of not having quality. Because, SOC 2, we hear about it left and right online. There's been a lot of criticism, and it's such a competitive area, whether it's on the audit side or the GRC platform or with the advisors, and it's cost cutting. And whenever that happens, quality is going to be all over the place. So if a company wants a SOC 2 report, they can get it pretty quick and easy. The question is it going to allow them to close deals the way they think it can? Some companies really just want it so they can throw that logo on their website, that SOC 2 logo. Mm-hmm. And I've literally reached out to numerous companies and asked them cybersecurity questions, and they say, oh, as you've seen on our website, we have SOC 2. And it's like, yeah, but that doesn't answer all questions. And then a lot of times, if they can't answer those questions, companies are going to just keep asking questions, or even ask them to do their cybersecurity questionnaire, especially if it's a bigger company. Some bigger companies that have leverage, even if you have a SOC 2, they might say, okay, well, we ask everyone to do this 150 item questionnaire, so just do it if you want to close the deal. And if you're a startup and you need the deal more than they do, you're probably going to do what they say. So it does pay to focus on quality proactively. And like right now, we have prep service clients in the pipeline, and they ask for help finding an auditor. So we made sure to only refer auditors that we know are good and we have no conflicts of interest in, right? Like, we don't only look at conflicts of interest for our firm, we look at the conflicts of interest for the auditor's firm, and we look at how this is going to play out for the client, because people are going to be thinking about this. The quality of the auditor is going to matter more and more, and not just the mere existence of a SOC 2 report, because companies are realizing that not all SOC 2 reports are created equally.
Yeah. Well, I think we're starting to see that, with the creation of the SOC 2 Quality Guild and people on the client side being a little bit more picky about their third-party risk management, and the creation of some new third-party risk management platforms. I mean, that's the next, big trend I see in GRC right now is, the SOC in the box platforms. That's becoming a very crowded space right now. Whereas there's not too many third-party risk management platforms, and there's not too many platforms that service the auditors themselves to make the external audits more efficient. Field Guide is by far the major market leader in that space, and they have some smaller competitors popping up, but not anywhere close to their market share. So I think that'll be interesting to watch, and I anticipate a lot of hiring is going to start to happen at these new startup TPRM platforms, and then the audit firm selling to the audit firm platforms like Field Guide and their competitors. So yeah, it's been interesting to watch. Any thoughts on the job market overall? I guess being that you're an advisor and you talk to a lot of companies, like, are they having any issues finding people, or is it pretty easy for them?
I think the big discussion comparison for these companies is, what can we do with our existing resources? Do we need to go external? And if we should, can we get by with just using a GRC platform? Can we send certain parts overseas? Should we work with an advisory firm like ours? But if they're finding that there's clear benefits, or if there's a need to handle something in-house, like maybe they have a contractual obligation, I still see hiring going pretty well. I see a lot of demand for GRC. I see a lot of demand for cloud security and automation. But it's not just one lane companies want. They don't want someone that knows general cybersecurity. They want a combination of you understand cybersecurity for cloud, and you know how to automate. And a big part of that is GRC engineering and coding.
Yep. Well, that's been an interesting space to watch as well. I mean, it seems seemingly increasingly gone are the days that you can come out of an accounting program and do GRC without much knowledge of anything technical whatsoever. I always found that interesting, and often I think the clients, the CISOs or security engineers that were undergoing an audit from an external auditor, that maybe they left college, they graduated from college 6 months ago, and they're like the lead on their external audit. Like, well, they don't know what they're auditing. They've never been in IT. They've never done anything technical in security. I'm having to tell them things about audits that they don't know. So I think that is changing a little bit. The expectations from the auditor side, as well as what internal GRC analysts need to be doing. It is increasingly more about automation and being more technical, and workflows to automate evidence collection and continuous assurance versus point in time audits. I think that'll be a big movement. Well, it's already started, obviously, but moving forward, continuous assurance versus, hey, we were good 6 months ago, but a lot has changed in 6 months. So the systems need to move with us. And then, the people need to be adaptable too, which makes me think there probably are certain traits in people that are going to be more in demand in the coming years versus, maybe would have been even 10 years ago in GRC and security overall. I guess if you were hiring, what would be some traits that you would look for in somebody in such a, to be as cliche as possible, I guess, ever changing environment, with AI and automation.
Yeah, I would look for someone that's an early adopter, and that's someone that is fine and curious. If they actually really like it, and like people that have a home lab, that's a good sign. And as someone that's on the UNLV Cybersecurity Advisory Board and mentors a lot, I've seen that happen a lot, and it's helped every time. I've never seen that not help, because it makes the people better, and it's also a strong indicator of their forward-looking nature, which is so important in this field. But I think we also have to have the flexibility and not just try to, like, if you're a coder, a developer, that's great, but we can't overlook the more traditional aspects of GRC. If we know the frameworks really well, like all the traditional GRC stuff, we can't just rest on those laurels. We have to be open to learning some coding, or at minimum, getting comfortable working with the developers in your area, right? Because it doesn't always have to be you, especially at a larger company, right? Like we're in the government, and we were in a compliance office to the point where it would never have been us, even though some of us did know how to code. We're not going to be the ones to be implementing the scripts. We would have to send it to a different department. So it makes sense that either have those skill sets or be able to collaborate with the parties that do, because being single-minded, whether you're technically oriented or not, it's just not going to work that well anymore.
Yeah, well, yeah. And that goes back to my point from earlier, I guess, about being task-oriented. You can't be task-oriented anymore. You have to be more strategy-oriented and forward-thinking and big picture-oriented. You have to be thinking about systems and architecture, not executing individual tasks. So it seems to me like the bar just keeps getting raised for every profession, especially in knowledge work, because, we talk about AI and automation taking away the entry-level jobs. Is that a good thing? I don't know. I tend to think people need purpose in their work. And I think we need to have a pipeline of people that eventually will be more senior. So that's what I can't figure out, is how we get more of these entry-level folks to have them start climbing the career ladder to where eventually we'll have more senior people. But there's no question that these days you need to be adaptable. You need to be forward-looking. You need to be bigger picture thinking than maybe you had to be 10 years ago. I guess, how do you assess some of that if you're hiring and you're interviewing people? What are some good questions you can kind of draw out some of these intangible things, where it's maybe not something that you actually see on a resume?
Yeah. Even though companies want to use AI, I think we should still look for people that are above average on their own, right? Because being able to use like an LLM or an AI tool, that in itself is not a competitive differentiator. If we all have access to a tool, and the tool is sometimes even free, we can't think that's an advantage. So we can elicit this information to some degree by looking at a resume, but probably better than anyone the shortfalls of the traditional resume. So what we can do is just ask hard questions, ask strategy-based questions. And then another thing is that we're seeing in this area that's working well for people is having a portfolio. If we're looking for GRC engineering type people, they're building portfolios, and more people are doing it every day. I'm in AJ Yawn, who you probably know from LinkedIn. He's well known. He's written a couple of books now on GRC. He's a strong advocate for having a GRC portfolio, which is really like a living resume. You show what you built. If you say you built something, just show it. It's always going to work better. Like I have a couple of friends that build websites, and we were talking about different content types. And I say, if you want to draw content online, the quickest way you could do that is just show a great website. You don't have to. It's cool to show like that. The mindset of what people want. But if you show a great website, people are going to contact you and say, I want that. Make it as simple as buying ice cream. That looks good. Give me that. And there is a way to do that in cybersecurity. And we can look for that whether we're on the hiring side or the applicant side.
Oh, for sure. Well, it's so funny. I just saw a post about this. Somebody had posted that if you're interviewing with the company, you should show, not tell, because showing, it carries so much more weight. So I'm thinking of an example of myself. When I interviewed for a recruiter role at an audit firm, they had interviewed a bunch of people, I guess, and I was the only one who was proactive enough to bring resumes to the interview of people that I had sourced. They didn't ask me to do this. I just did it because I figured it would be a good feather in my cap. And they said, yeah, nobody had ever done that. That's the best operations interview we ever had. So many people, I think they think kind of inside the box when it comes to engineering, toe the line, follow all of the regular interview questions, the STAR method, all of these things that are like traditional good advice. But I think that's sometimes missing the forest through the trees in an environment that is so competitive. It's like you have to be creative. You have to think outside the box. You have to differentiate yourself somehow. And showing, not telling is a perfect way of doing that. Having a GitHub repo, so many different ways, or writing, white papers, thought leadership on LinkedIn. All these things can be differentiators, but most people, I think, have some sort of imposter syndrome, or they feel like, oh, I can't do that, or, that's not really what the career coaches are saying, or I don't know. It's a lot to learn, it seems like, but as the bar continues to get raised, people are going to need to be up on all of this stuff and continue to level up. It's always been important in security, but even more so now, it seems like, with how many people are on the market. So.
Yeah, I think a big part of that is personal branding, right? Like branding in general, whether you're a business or a person, it's pretty similar, right? Like, why is my wife obsessing over buying a Cartier love bracelet that costs $5,500 and the material is probably like $200 when she already has a fake one that she bought for like $40 that looks just as good? It's branding. And she has nice stuff too, but we pick and choose the areas of our life where we care about spending more money on branding. But when it comes to personal branding, it's massive. It's probably the biggest way to stand out versus AI and to stand out in our field. Like, look how we're talking right now, Pete. Like, Karina and I asked you to do the webinar with us in December, and that's because you stood out. I know plenty of recruiters. I've been solicited for jobs, pretty good jobs. I'm not looking for jobs. I haven't applied for a job in a long time, but been solicited by them. You've never contacted me about a job at all. And look, we still wanted you. You're Pete, the GRC recruiter. That's your branding. And like the example you gave of bringing that stack of resumes to the interview, and you probably could have answered all sorts of questions about why those resumes were better, both the format and the context and how those people turned out at those companies. And that's how we differentiate these days. And that's only gonna become more of a thing.
Yeah. Well, especially as resumes and LinkedIn profiles and everything start to look more and more samey. It's like being human is a competitive advantage almost, where not all of your content is AI written. It's actually in your own voice, in your own personality. I think that's a big part of branding nowadays, and it's going to be even more and more important as time goes on. So,
AI content, it's kind of crazy. And we've even talked about this at UNLV on the board, AI usage. My personal perspective is that AI is okay, but we can't look at the end result any differently. Like, it's either good or it's not, like none of our clients have ever said, oh, this report you gave us is great. That risk assessment is great. Our cybersecurity is awesome, but how much of it did you do versus AI? They're still looking at us for the assurance, and they don't care if we used AI.
Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, it depends on what it is that you're doing. Yeah. I think, but from a branding perspective, having that personality that you inject into something, and you can still leverage AI to write maybe the bulk of things, but then, edit out the tells and then, inject your own voice into something. I think that's authenticity certainly seems to sell in this market. But yeah, we're coming up on time, Mike. So just one last question for you. Is there anything we're not talking about in the industry, but we should be, especially as it relates to hiring?
Yeah, I would say for the company side to find the point where automation and assurance cross, right? Like we need to have a good process, but we need to, then it's good to automate, but we need to slow the automation at the point where it's out of control and assurance is dropping. And it doesn't need to be some crazy math equation. Just literally look at how things are going for you. Look at your audit logs. Do some analysis. There's not one right way to do it, and any effort spent on this is better than not. You may be surprised by what you find. You may be able to automate more. Conversely, on the applicant side, I think applicants need to think about how to get on the train that is AI and automation rather than being in front of the train. Because if someone's worried, I may not have opportunities because of AI, well, then you become the person that knows AI. You become the person that's safe and growing by AI. And the people that I've mentored that think that way, that have embraced AI, they're growing quicker than I ever could have imagined in their companies. This one guy, he graduated from UNLV like less than 2 years ago. He's got I'm not going to put a salary out there, but it's already really a lot more than I could have imagined. And he's recently interviewed for multiple jobs that pay upwards of $400,000, both at Microsoft and TikTok. And it shows that these companies are hiring. The fact that people are new isn't a limiter. So we got to position ourselves to be differentiated and embrace technology.
For sure. Yeah, differentiation is everything right now. Well, if people want to find you, Mike, what's the best way to do so?
Yeah, on LinkedIn every day, Michael.Andrews, that's Andrewes. Happy to connect or chat.
Sounds good. Well, thanks for your time, Mike. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thank you, Pete.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Talent Gap Fireside Chat. Don't forget to follow our page on LinkedIn and like and subscribe on Spotify and YouTube. Hit that notification bell to be notified when we drop a new episode. New episodes air every Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern.